You guys may have heard of the Argonian Counter Invasion that happened during the Oblivion Crisis. According to the Anzalil, the Daedra had to close the Oblivion Gates because of the Argonian Counter Invasion in Black Marsh. But this is actually heavily propaganda. The Anzalil is a political party that formed during the Oblivion Crisis that's comprised of Argonians. The Argonians definitely shut down some gates, but the Imperials did in likely other regions as well. In the perspective of Imperials, the Anzalil were entirely nativistic in their views, interested only in purging the former colonial influences, and they wished to return Black Marsh to the way it was prior to Duskfall, which was the slow decline of the original Argonian civilizations. It's assumed that the claims of the Anzalil coincide with Martin Septim's actions in Oblivion. My people knew slavery under the old empire. We knew it very well. Yes, but that was ending when the Oblivion Crisis happened. Look, even you have to admit that if Mehrunes Dagon had won, if Martin hadn't beaten him... Martin and the Empire didn't beat him in Black Marsh, Glim said, his voice rising. The Anzalil did. When the gates opened, Argonians poured into Oblivion with such fury and might, Dagon's lieutenants had to close them. Anaig realized that she was leaning away from her friend and her pulse had picked up. She smelled something sharp and faintly sulphurous. Amazed, she regarded him for a moment. Yes, she finally said, when the scent diminished. But without Martin's sacrifice, Dagon would have eventually taken Black Marsh too, and made this world his sport ground. Glim shifted and held out his glass to be refilled. I don't want to argue about this, he said. I don't see that it's important. You sounded as if you thought so for a second there, old friend. I thought I heard a little passion in your voice, and you smelled like you were spoiling for a fight. Mir Glim, or just Glim as he's often called in the Infernal City, was indoctrinated by this story, and he was unable to counter it when given the wider concept of the Oblivion Crisis. The Hist were many, and they were one. Their roots burrowed deep beneath the black soil and soft white stone of Black Marsh, connecting them all, and thus connecting all Saxiel, all Argonians. The Hist gave his people life, form, purpose. It was the Hist who had seen through the shadows to the Oblivion Crisis, who called all the people back to the marsh, defeated the forces of Mehrunes Dagon, drove the Empire into the sea, and laid waste to all their ancient enemies in Morrowind. All propaganda has elements of truth to it, though. Mir Glim said the Argonians had a warning, so they had time to prepare a defense. And this also has another source. Here's a quote from Oblivion. Many of the Argonians say they have been called back to Black Marsh. They disappear into the swamps and are never seen again. The main reference we have to the Oblivion Gates in Black Marsh being closed because of the Argonian Counter Invasion comes from Glim, who had some anti-imperial Anzalil influence. Meanwhile, we have an actual explanation to why the gates were closed, and that's Martin's sacrifice. That we can see within the game. The Thalmor also claimed to close the Oblivion Gates in Somerset, so the Anzalil are not the only ones who took claim to closing these gates when Martin made his sacrifice. It can't be argued that the Argonians didn't fare better in the crisis because they all got together, and we can see this because of the aftermath. They were independent and were able to invade Morrowind. In conclusion, the Argonian Counter Invasion was heavily propaganda from the Anzalil, which was a political party that was very anti-imperial. As Martin Septim's sacrifice was what ended up closing the gates of Oblivion, sources do show that the Hist called them back to Black Marsh in more than one place, so we can say that that's probably true, but otherwise it's heavily influenced by propaganda. So this was a discussion video about the Argonian Counter Invasion from the Oblivion Crisis. Did you guys enjoy this video? Would you like to see more? Let me know in the comments, and please make sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching. This has been Charlatan.